Hello everyone. We are halfway towards 2025 and it's this time where I get to talk about my personal favorite releases out of the year so far. These are the 25 albums that I do recommend you to give them a shot. Even if some might not be your cup of tea, you might end up being pleasantly surprised. The albums on this list are in no particular order, and the first one I'm going to shout out is the new Miley Cyrus album, Something Beautiful, which was my most pleasant surprise out of the year so far. I always saw the potential in Miley Cyrus, and there have been a few works in the past that I find them to be pretty decent. Even if some of the more risky ventures might not pay off at the end, this is the one Miley Cyrus album that I can easily say I enjoyed from start to finish. Her voice was always a standout aspect, and it was about time to see her reach her full potential with actually great songwriting and some really beautiful and catchy tunes. Even taking like some of the interludes for example, by themselves they are pretty solid electronic ideas that do not feel like filler material that drags the album's length. Very enjoyable pop rock and psychedelic album and a step up in the right direction. Hopefully we'll get more like this in the future. At number 24, let's go into a bit more underground territory with the awesome split between Clank Quartet and Crank Sturgeon. Released in Orb Tapes, which is a great place to search for experimental stuff, I was familiar with the very eccentric performances of Clank Quartet, but never really listened to any of their releases. So I decided to give this one a shot, and this is such an interesting craftsmanship of noises and with both sides being really imaginative with the way they experiment with lots of different sounds. The overall chaotic feel is quite overwhelming, but overall I'd say that it makes for one of the most standout noise releases I've heard all year in terms of its experimentation and sound design. At number 23, let's keep up with the chaotic noise side of things and talk about the new release of Sissy Spacek, Entrance. I really dig this new era of Sissy Spacek that we also see in the solo works of John Wish, which is this very bizarre sound collage noise with improvised elements and so many insane glitchy sounds. This album is similar to Bolero Shield, another work that I really enjoyed, so if you are familiar with this album, expect more of the same with Entrance, just with less noise core and only packed in 4 lengthy tracks. Another solid continuation of a formula that so far has made for some really cool results. At number 22 is Bad Connection by Spam Caller. I simply got into this album because of this incredible album cover that I absolutely love, and this is a pretty short hardcore punk album released in Fate Tapes, and man, this has to be one of the filthiest, one of the greatest punk albums I've heard in recent memory. Like, this is such a raw and relentless album, very nice riffs, the vocals are excellent and really well fitting, and it doesn't really have anything particularly special about it, but this one just clicked with me instantly. It's a raw punk that is extremely good at what it does. At number 21 we go into dark techno territory with the new Slam album, Dark Channel. After being really impressed with what I've heard with the Wave Expansion EP, which was quite different compared to what Slam were initially playing, I decided to give this album a shot and it's pretty good. Blood pumping and minimal hard techno that is really straightforward and has all of the elements needed in order to make for 10 really solid moments from start to finish, where the energy is non-stop for almost an hour. In terms of a dark, gritty and mechanical techno album, this one will get you covered. It's really solid. At number 20 is gonna be No Hand Path with Mystikismostis and Illikiosis. I haven't really found many standout black metal releases in 2025, but this Greek band really got my attention with one of the most intriguing radical anarchist black metal sounds out of Greece in recent memory. Powerful riffs, solid production, and overall has many elements that I enjoy when it comes to black metal, so check this out if you're looking for new releases in the genre. At number 19 is the new Panos Alexiades album, Sestrum Nocturnum. I already mentioned one of his works in my latest video about Greek underground releases, and this one is another great and heavily experimental ambient album with very imaginative sections of pitched down vocals, and another case of an album with very rich sound design. Panos Alexiadis proves himself of being one of the most interesting names in the current electronic and experimental Greek scene. And keeping up with Greek artists, at number 18 is another Greek release by Spyros Polychronopoulos called Void. With this one being included in my list with top Greek releases you might haven't heard of, Spyros Polychronopoulos, also known by the moniker Spy Weirdos, is known for his experimental and sporadic sound designs and field recordings. With the departure with Void, we see a venture to minimal drone and ambient, and the results are phenomenal. Very imaginative album, even with how little there is actually to it. Undoubtedly one of my favorite releases of the year. Next at number 17 is the new Deafheaven album, Lonely People with Power. After the somewhat disappointing Infinite Granite that had way more focus to shoegaze and wasn't that well executed, Lonely People with Power is a really solid return to form, with its great blend of black metal ferocity with gorgeous melodic passages that has put them on the spot as one of the most defining black gaze bands. This album certainly contains some of their most polished and fleshed out ideas in their career so far. There's not something that I find particularly impressive about it, but in its formula, this album gave me more than what I initially expected. At number 16 is the collaboration between Sumac and More Mother, the film. For me, both of those artists had the potential for something greater because I really like their concepts and bold experimentations, but I couldn't get into their stuff. This is the first time where I believe it works best for both artists. The combination of the chaotic, somewhat free improvised sludge metal of Sumac with the striking spoken word delivery and poetry of More Mother is something that works really well, as if this collaboration was meant to happen. The two worlds collide together for a very unique experience that finally shows to me the potential of those artists that I could see shine like the way it did with the film. At number 15 is the new album of Park Ji-ha, All Living Things, continuing with a combination of traditional Korean music alongside avant folk elements that we saw with the previous work The Gleam. All Living Things brings even more beautiful and soothing minimalistic ideas. This album is just a trip. It can be sad or a moody one, but the beauty, the atmosphere is something that carries on throughout the entire track listing. If you have already heard past works of Park Ji-ha, this new album is also really worth it. At number 14 is another album that I got into it just completely blind and I really enjoyed it. This is Saba Lezadeh's Temple of Hope. I was actually familiar with the debut Scattered Memories, but Temple of Hope in particular is a very intriguing combination of Iranian traditional elements and modular synths. Reflecting on the current conflicts and political climate in the Middle East, this is a very dark industrial and ambient album with many experimentations and a constant moody tone that is enhanced with some outwardly glitchy sound design. I'd say the closest that I can think of similar to this is what Muslim Ghost did with the album Assassin, except Temple of Hope is more impactful and emotional in my opinion, so I believe that fans of electronic experimental music, you're in for a treat with this one. At number 13 is Harlem Electronics with Cage. After being really impressed with their EBM and new beat sound of their debut Paid, the Swedish duo returns, renamed Harlem Electronics this time and offering another amazing set of 8 rhythmic industrial tracks with very imaginative melodies and vocal chops, a dark undertone and a ton of creative sounds. Harlem have achieved once again to make one of the most creative electronic and EBM albums of this decade, a close contender for Album of the Year for me so far. At number 12 is the new album of Sparks, Mad. The fact that these two brothers are close to their 80s and are still able to create such quality music is really mind-blowing to me. I really admire the dedication to their craft, but apart from that, there are some really nice synth-pop ideas over here, with a quirky horror-esque aesthetic at times, and just an album that, for the most part, is really enjoyable to sit through. Speaking of artists that is impressive, they just keep on going, at number 11 is the new Swans album, Birthing. In this new era, we get another really lengthy, almost 2-hour album with just 7 tracks, in which all of them have this overwhelming energy with amazing progressions, walls of noise, chaotic experimentations, and adding another beautiful yet devastating post-rock album in their catalogue. There is also the Merge, which came off as a big surprise, being a more industrial moment, so things like this are enough to break the monotony and showcase their ability to reinvent the wheel with another well put together work out of their latest era. But in case Birthing was not enough for you, Ramle have got you covered at number 10 with their new album Hypervigilance. Starting off as one of the most iconic power electronics names in the 80s, Ramle would go more and more into noise rock territory. And while the previous album 6 years ago, The Great Unlearning, felt really underwhelming to me, this new one was very impressive. It basically feels like it combines the newest era of Swans with the more chaotic elements and 80s era Swans with the more aggressive and industrial sound, and it turned out being way better than I anticipated. Really pleased with how much I actually enjoyed this. At number 9 is the new Ben Frost album Under Certain Light and Atmospheric Conditions. The previous album Scope Neglect felt like such a unique idea of these usual ambient passages with industrial metal elements, but in my opinion was poorly implemented. Right here though, this same idea is being used with more imagination, better sounds, and overall just a more compelling experience that brings those innovative ideas to life. This is definitely one of Ben Frost's boldest artistic ventures that actually pays off with an album that is guaranteed to leave an impression on you. At number 8 is Goldie presents Refugee Crew with the album Alpha Omega. After a series of underwhelming releases, the new Goldie album with the moniker Refugee Crew is the best thing he's done since Timeless. If you like the darker undertone and punchier old school breaks of the track Saint Angel and wish for more like this, then this is what you're gonna get with Alpha Omega, definitely the darkest and most intense album Goldie has ever put out. If you like the old school hardcore jungle breaks and punchy sub bass, you're gonna find many great new drum and bass tunes over here. This album slaps. At number 7 is the new album of Valhalla, Skimningser. I don't know how to pronounce this. Being really pleased with what the Swedish duo has put out, I get really excited to get into any of their new stuff, and this album just adds further to this formula they have almost perfected, witch house with a touch of neo-folk aesthetics, with a ton of occult elements, a trippy outwardly sound, and a combination of male and female vocals, and once again some of the most unique and ethereal dark electronic music you'll find out there. Valhalla have done it again. At number 6 is this great comeback of Death in Vegas with the album Death Mask. Being a group that could constantly go in many different directions of electronic music, this one that comes 9 years after transmission full on embraces techno. It's a dark techno album with very minimal and repetitive instrumentation, ambient passages, and a really dark and moody atmosphere, going a bit more into the ambient side of techno rather than full-on energetic tracks, but some of them would fit nicely in an underground techno club. Really surprised that this was gonna be the comeback of Death in Vegas, but I'm glad it turned out as good as it did. At number 5 is the new Pink Sifu album, Black Antique. This is definitely one of the most interesting experimental hip-hop albums of this year so far. Going from trap to industrial, abstract hip-hop, noise, jazzy elements, this album is a mess, has a lot going on, and while it overstays its welcome, at least it has lots of great bizarre ideas that stand out, even if it loses its momentum a bit the second half. From deliveries to instrumentations, this album has it all. Pink Sifu proves once again to be one of the most intriguing names in hip-hop in recent memory. At number 4 is the new Billy Woods album, Gollywog. Being considered one of the greatest rappers in hip-hop of this generation, I really struggled to see the potential, as to me he just sounded like another abstract hip-hop rapper that definitely has the delivery and the lyricism, but I just couldn't overall get into his works. After giving chances at some albums I've heard from him, this finally changes with Gollywog. It definitely has the most creative usage of sampling and the most standout instrumentals that help enhance the weird and unique delivery of Billy Woods and his rapping abilities. A really dark album and a big standout of this year. At number 3 is Pristine Shit with Virgin Martyr. This album is for those who want an absolute relentless harsh noise experience that assaults the listeners from start to finish with no breaks. Being one of the many groups Richard Ramirez is part of, you know what you're getting into, and it has enough dynamics and change-ups to it so that it's not just monotonous harsh noise wall. One of the filthiest and most ruthless harsh noise album this year has to offer in my opinion. At number 2 is the new Cozy Funny Tutti album, Tutti 2. Being one of the members of Throbbing Crystal and one of the most iconic names in the industrial scene, her new solo effort is a sort of an ethereal industrial album with lots of old school type synths and many vocal manipulations that make for some ideas that might not sound groundbreaking, but it's still really interesting to say the least. It's a really nice atmospheric electronic release that adds nicely to her catalog. And at number 1, the last album I want to shout out is the collaboration of The Rita and Drum Loop with Eyelines. To me, this album basically contains the greatest elements that made albums such as Ballet Fit Positions so special to me. Instead of just being a straight up harsh noise wall album, Eyelines contains recordings of lectures on basically how to apply eyelines, and it's interrupted with crackling noises that play sporadically. Having those lo-fi recordings while simultaneously having some richly textured walls of noise makes for the type of shit I admire in experimental circles. It's also nice that certain parts go more into the dark ambient side, it has lots of moments that catch you off guard, and this is what brings character to all 4 of those songs, making for what is possibly for me the most complete and compelling The Rita album I can think of to date. And those are the 25 albums that I recommend out of 2025 so far. Let me know yours down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.